You wake up, you make your coffee, you sit down at your desk, and before you even take your first sip, something already feels wrong. Not wrong like something bad happened, just wrong like the day already feels heavy, like you already feel behind. Like there's already this low hum of dread sitting somewhere in your chest that you can't quite explain and can't quite shake. And the frustrating part is that nothing terrible is happening. You're not in crisis, you're not dealing with some massive disaster, you're just at work, doing what you do every single day, and yet somehow you end up absolutely exhausted by 2 in the afternoon. Not physically tired. Emotionally hollowed out. I want to talk about that today. Because what I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes changed how hundreds of people experience their workday, and I mean that in a way that is not exaggerated. People who used to drag themselves through every afternoon, people who used to snap at their families when they got home because they had nothing left inside, people who used to lie in bed at night feeling this vague but persistent sense of failure even when they technically got things done. There is one specific habit that is doing most of the damage. One thing that most people do dozens of times every single day without even realizing it's costing them anything. And by the time you understand what it is, you're going to recognize it immediately. You're going to think, that's me. That's been me this whole time. Before I go deeper, I want you to know there's a program linked in the description below this video. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it right now because the content here matters more in this moment, but if what I'm sharing today resonates with you, that program exists for exactly the kind of person watching this. Most people who find it wait too long before they actually take action, and they tell me later that they wish they hadn't. If this video is hitting something real for you, don't be the person who watches, nods along, and then goes right back to the same exhausting cycle. You can check it out at the end. Now, let me tell you about what's actually happening to you. There's something that research on emotional fatigue has tracked for years now. It's not about how hard your work is, it's not about how long your hours are. Those things matter, but they're not the hidden culprit. The hidden culprit is something called emotional self-monitoring. And most high-functioning, caring, responsible people do it constantly without any awareness that it's happening. Here's what it looks like in practice. You're on a call, someone says something that bothers you, maybe it's dismissive, maybe it's slightly condescending, maybe it just rubs you wrong, and instead of noting it and moving on, a part of your brain immediately starts working overtime. Did I react badly? Did it show on my face? Did they notice? Should I have said something? Am I being too sensitive? What do they think of me? Should I send a follow-up message to smooth it over? That whole spiral happens in about 4 seconds. And then you move on. And then it happens again, and again, and again. 40, 50, 60 times a day, small moments, small spirals, each one barely noticeable, all of them together quietly consuming a massive amount of mental and emotional fuel. By the end of the day, you feel like you ran a marathon, but you can't point to the race. Because the drain didn't come from one big thing. It came from 1,000 tiny invisible acts of self-monitoring, second-guessing, managing impressions, and absorbing the emotional weight of every interaction you had. You've been doing emotional labor all day without knowing it had a name. And here's the part that makes it even harder. The people who do this the most are not weak people. They are the most empathetic people, the most conscientious people, the ones who actually care about how they come across and how others feel, the ones who pay attention, the ones who are good at their jobs precisely because they notice things. Which means if you're sitting here recognizing yourself in this, that's not a character flaw you're uncovering. That's actually a marker of someone with high emotional intelligence who has never been given the tools to channel it without burning themselves out. I've seen this pattern in people across every kind of work environment. Remote workers who thought they would feel more relaxed once they stopped commuting but somehow felt even more drained at home. Office workers who dread Monday mornings not because of the work itself but because of the emotional gauntlet they know they're about to walk through. Leaders and managers who pour everything they have into their teams and arrive home emotionally bankrupt with nothing left for themselves or the people they love. The numbers behind this are striking. Studies tracking workplace emotional exhaustion found that people engaged in consistent emotional self-monitoring reported up to 60% higher fatigue levels at the end of the workday, compared to people who had developed habits of emotional regulation, 60%. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between finishing your workday and having real energy left versus finishing your workday and immediately needing an hour of doing absolutely nothing just to function as a human being again. Think about what that hour cost you. Over a 5-day work week, that's 5 hours. Over a month, that's roughly 20 hours. Over a year, that's more than 240 hours of your life spent recovering from a drain that doesn't have to be as severe as it is. 240 hours. That's 10 full days. 10 days of your year that you spend in a fog on your couch, scrolling your phone, eating food you didn't really want, watching something you won't remember, because your nervous system has been running on fumes, and it's demanding recovery time you wouldn't need to spend if you had a different approach to how you move through your workday emotionally. And I want to be very honest with you here. This is not about being less sensitive. This is not about caring less. The solution is never to stop being the thoughtful, perceptive person you are. The solution is about learning how to process what you absorb so it doesn't stack up inside you like weight you have to keep carrying. Because right now, here's what's happening. Every unresolved microtension from your day, every moment where you monitored yourself and didn't land anywhere, every interaction that you haven't fully processed, it all goes somewhere, and where it goes is into your body, into your shoulders, into your jaw, into that hollow, tired feeling behind your eyes by 3 p.m, into the short fuse you have by the time you get home, into the way you crawl into bed at night feeling weirdly wired and weirdly exhausted at the same time. That feeling has a cause, and the cause is learnable, which means it's also solvable. The first shift that makes a meaningful difference, and I want you to actually try this tomorrow, is learning to create a gap between input and reaction. Right now, when something bothers you during your workday, what most people do is one of two things. They either react immediately, which often makes things worse, or they suppress it completely, which means it doesn't go away, it just gets stored in your body for later. The gap is a third option. A moment you create deliberately where you notice something without immediately deciding what it means. That sounds small. It is not small. People who practice creating that gap consistently report feeling meaningfully less drained within 2 to 3 weeks. Not because their work changed, not because the people around them changed, but because they stopped spending so much energy in the spiral of immediate self-judgment that follows every uncertain interaction. The second shift is learning the difference between emotions that need your attention and emotions that are just weather. Some of what you feel during your workday is genuinely information. It's telling you something important about a relationship, a boundary, a value. And some of it is just weather, passing conditions that have no instruction for you. They just exist for a moment and then move on. Most of us treat all of it as instruction. We take all of it seriously. We try to analyze all of it, and that is an enormous waste of energy. Learning to tell the difference, learning to say that one matters and I'll return to it, and that one is just weather and I'll let it pass, is one of the most genuinely life-changing skills available to someone who experiences emotional exhaustion at work. And it is a skill. It can be built. It gets faster and easier with practice until it becomes automatic. The third shift is around how you end your workday. Not in terms of what tasks you complete, but in terms of how you close the emotional loop of the day. Most people don't do this at all. Most people just stop working and expect their brain to immediately shift gears. But if you've spent 8 or 9 hours absorbing, monitoring, managing, and processing, your nervous system doesn't just switch off because you closed your laptop. A deliberate transition, even just 5 minutes, something that signals to your brain and body that the workday is over and you are now a full human being again. Not just a professional navigating an environment, makes a measurable difference in how quickly you recover and how present you're actually able to be during your personal time. These 3 things, the gap, the weather filter, and the closing ritual, are the beginning of a completely different relationship with your workday. Not because your work becomes easier, but because you stop leaking energy in ways you never even noticed you were leaking it. And the people who have actually applied this in a structured, intentional way, not just heard it in a video but genuinely worked through it with support and process, they describe it in ways that honestly still move me when I hear it. They say things like, I have energy to give my kids after work for the first time in years. I go to bed feeling like I actually lived my day instead of survived it. I realized I'd forgotten what it felt like to not be tired. That's what's on the other side of this. Not a perfect life, not a stress-free job, but a version of yourself that isn't being quietly drained every single day by a habit nobody ever taught you to recognize, let alone change. The program I mentioned at the beginning of this video is linked in the description. I want to be direct with you for just a moment. Most people watching this will recognize everything I've described. Most people will feel that quiet knowing sensation that says, yes, that's exactly what happens to me. And most of those people will move on and do nothing different. Not because they don't want to change, but because change without structure almost never sticks. If you're serious about not spending another year emptied out by 5 o'clock, go check it out now, not later. Not after you see if things get better on their own. Now. The people who act when the recognition is fresh are the ones who actually get somewhere. Don't let this be another video you watched that almost changed something.